I'm Peng Shepherd, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret Wise,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Peng Shepherd.
Be sure to go over to hankgarner.com and subscribe to the show. There's handy links in the sidebar where you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app, on your phone, on your computer, wherever you do it. You can find links there. You also find us on YouTube. There's a link in the sidebar as well. I'd like to thank some sponsors who faithfully support the show and allow us to do what we do. George Kramer and his new book, Blind to Blood. Ben Bergstall had a unique job. He was a tissue procurement specialist. When someone died, he would surgically remove people's body parts for donation. He really enjoyed doing it. So much so, when an anonymous email asked him to consider recovering people's body parts on the side, he was more than happy to oblige. The trouble was Ben sought out live people to fulfill his clandestine clients' needs. Read all about Ben's exploits in this riveting book that delves into tissue procurement, Blind to Blood by George Kramer. Pick up your copy today on Amazon and find out why people are saying this is an intense page-turner, that they are also fascinated by digging into the mind of Ben and finding out how he works. If you would like to see a look into the darker side of humanity, pick up Blind to Blood, the riveting new page-turner by George Kramer. Also, I'd like to thank Richard Thomas for sponsoring the show. Richard has an online fiction writers course, the University of Richard, and there's a link in the show notes. There's a banner there where you can click on and you can see the course guide. Lots and lots of classes coming up. He can help teach you to be the best writer you can be. There's classes coming up for the 2018 and 2019 season, like short story mechanics, writing flash fiction, contemporary dark fiction, advanced creative writing workshops, how to write a novel in a year, lots and lots of stuff from a very prolific and excellent writer, Richard Thomas, teaching you how to be the best writer you can be. It's the University of Richard. There's a link in the show notes. As always, stay tuned at the end of the show for an audiobook clip from our good friend Richard Gleaves. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Peng Shepherd on the show with me. She has a brand new book that is out today, and it's called The Book of M, and this looks like a fascinating story. Welcome to the show, Peng.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited to have you. This is your first novel, right?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to talk all about it here in just a minute, but we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, I actually have a very clear memory of that. It was when I was about 5 or 6, I think, when you're just first starting to learn to read and write, and my mom was reading was so important to her, and she wanted to really kind of instill a love of it in us. And so she would read to my brother and I every night. We'd have a bedtime story. And when I was first starting to learn to write myself, I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to make those things that we read every night. And so I actually tried to. I went and got some paper and my crayons, and I made, I don't know, some silly story. I think it was about a spider. And but my mom was so cute when I actually gave it to her, and it was really sweet how seriously she took it. She took the pages to her office, and she got them laminated and put a little spiral binder in the back, and brought it home and said, "This is your book," And I think we read that one that night for a bedtime story instead of, something from the shelf. that was really the beginning of it. I was hooked.
That is so cool. I love those stories of a parent or teacher, who takes a kid seriously, and they just never know, what that little act on their part does to stay with someone for the rest of their life, and to sometimes launches a career. It's so funny, and I love hearing those stories from people. That makes my day.
Yeah, well, it was. I mean, hopefully, I would have kept going anyway, even if she'd been like, "Oh, that's nice, honey," and set it aside. But I think it was really just so important and really encouraging to me, because at that age, your mom is just everything to you, and that she, thought or pretended that this little book was so good. It really, it was so encouraging.
Right. And of course you would have continued with it. I think storytellers are born, that way. And sometimes storytellers turn into writers and go on to publish books. But I think that thing is inside you that wants to tell stories. And of course you would have continued on, but man, that little bit of encouragement sure does help, cause in a writer's life, there are some pretty dark days along the way. And, looking back on a happy moment, does a lot for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So where did you grow up?
Actually, Phoenix, Arizona. I was born and raised in Phoenix.
Nice. Did you, as you got through school, were you a bookish kid? Did you read a lot, other than when you were very small and reading with your mom? Were there things that captured your imagination and that you kind of geeked out on?
Oh gosh, yeah. I was I never wanted like toys or games for Christmas or for birthdays or whatever. I just wanted more and more books. So I think probably everybody, all the librarians at our local library or all of the local libraries in the area knew me, by name after a while, because I was probably going to bankrupt our family if we kept buying them from the bookstore. But I just read so quick, I guess, as and kid books are short, so.
I love it. Did you show any proficiency for writing when you were in high school?
Well, we were so I was in like an honors program in high school, and there was just so much essay writing, that was kind of the downward swing of, I would say, that, and then university a little bit. It was just so hard to find the time to write fiction. And there weren't, I think it's a lot better now, but at that time it kind of felt like there weren't a lot of contests and stuff or maybe I just didn't know how to find them. And so I felt a little disconnected from writing at that time, and it was not fun. But at the same time, I also felt really helpless about how to get back to it, because, high school and university can just be there's just so much work,
Right. It's so weird that, when you have a student who loves to write and wants to take classes to be a better writer, a lot of times you just get buried under soul crushing writing, essays and dry stuff. And any writing helps. But man, that you would hope the education system would see, maybe we need to feed this thing that this kid came to us with.
Yeah. I do think it's getting better now, and I think there's a lot more. I mean, I don't know if they actually have creative writing classes in high school, but I know it's so much more common in university, and you can even go get an MFA or a PhD in it. So it's getting a lot better.
Yeah, we seem to go through these swings in education where we're focusing on STEM, and we've got to get the math and sciences, which are hugely important, and we want those things. And then we realize, we need to feed a kid's creativity, and we swing back that way. And I would love if we could just find a balance and just feed it all.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So why did you decide to pursue an MFA?
That was actually, so I kind of lost my way with writing a little bit in high school, and then really in university. And then I actually went and got a graduate degree in international studies and diplomacy because I just thought, the job market being what it was at the time, that I needed some kind of a leg up. And then I got sucked into the private security industry, and that's where I first started working. That's where I got my first, adult job. And I was in the industry for maybe 4 years or something. And I was reaching the point where if I, took one more promotion or maybe two more promotions, I just knew that I'd be in so deep and I'd be up high enough in the ladder that I wouldn't leave ever. And it is a really interesting career, but it's so time consuming that I knew that if I never left it, I would never write again. And I just missed it too much. It felt like I had been denying this part of me it was the truest part, and I hadn't done it, and I was about to kind of lose it forever, or lose the chance to try to do it forever. And so I applied to MFA programs because I thought, I don't know, everything I do is really drastic. I couldn't just try to start writing on the side. I had to quit my job, apply to MFA programs. But that's what I did, and I got into one, and I just went for it, and it was probably the best decision I've ever made in my life because it got me on the track that I'm on now.
Wow. I had no idea that you worked in the private security industry. That's fascinating. So when you went to the MFA program, what were your expectations from that? Of course, you had to make this dramatic life change, and you were going to be a serious writer by quitting your job and doing that. What were your expectations, and what did you hope that program was going to do for you, or to transform you in some way? And did it live up to your expectations?
Oh, it definitely. Well, wait, let me start at the beginning. So I would say that I had really unrealistic expectations going in because I had never done an art degree like that before, and I think I just kind of assumed it was going to be the same thing as a lot of a medical degree where you get out and you're kind of just a doctor immediately, and the hospitals everywhere want you. And so I thought going in I'll finish a novel by the time I graduate, and then somebody will want it immediately and I'll sell it. And that's almost never how it goes because you're too busy learning. It's a program where you kind of you learn how to write, or you get much better at your writing. And so about halfway through, I realized, and I think this is really common for a lot of people that go into an MFA, you come in with nothing, or you of something, and it just slowly starts to get torn apart the further and further into the first semester you get, and you're more and more unsure of yourself, and it's really kind of scary at first because you think you're getting worse, and you have less and less of whatever manuscript you were working on than when you first started. But I would say, one of my professors said, actually, Darren Strauss, he said that for him it was true, and he thinks for a lot of graduates it's true, and it was also true for me, that it's almost never the thing that you're working on in the program that gets published. It's the thing you start right after the program that gets published. And because then you're you have learned everything you were probably going to learn, and you've gotten 2 or 3 years to grow and mature. And then you also don't have, this workshop kind of deciding your story by committee every other week. And sometimes that book just comes really quick compared to all of the difficulties and all of the panic attacks of the MFA.
I want to take a pause from the show for just a moment to tell you about a sponsor. As a writer, your editor is often the first and last eyes on your work. The best editors are trusted collaborators, bringing your story to life in a way you didn't know was possible. Marlowe Moss will take your writing to a new level and your career to new heights, ensuring that readers not only buy your book, but also love reading it too. One top editor calls Marlowe Moss a talented author in his own right and as skilled an editor as I've seen. I use his skills myself. One of his authors says, "I had no idea my writing could be this good. Tension, POV, or timeline issues, plot and pacing, Marlowe does it all, and for the price of a copy edit." Your hard work deserves a better editor, and Marlowe Moss is the editing partner you've been looking for at a price you can afford. offering developmental and copy editing as well as beta and proofreaders. Visit marlowmoss.net for more information and a free sample edit. That's MarlowMoss.net. And let me tell you, I have used Marlow Moss. He has edited a story for me, and the comments that I got back were eye-opening. You know, as a writer and as someone who spends time with words as much as I do, you tend to gloss over things. You just completely lose them because you're so involved in creating, and you need to step away and let someone else put their eyes on it and help you see the things that you can't see for yourself. Marlow Moss is amazing. MarlowMoss.net. I think when a lot of people think MFA, they think literary fiction and kind of that kind of slow-paced, very introspective novels come out of that sort of setting. But your new book, The Book of M, is it kind of breaks all of those MFA stereotypes because it's genre fiction and it's kind of post-apocalyptic and it's kind of a globe-trotting adventure. Where did don't let me get too far ahead, but you finished the MFA. When did the idea for the Book of M come to you?
Well, I actually kind of had a really early version of the idea in the MFA, and I tried to write it, and it went very badly for the reasons that I described in my last answer. With you're still learning so much, and everything is so new, and but I would say that actually I was writing pretty genre-y stuff the whole time I was in the MFA, and I was really nervous about it at first because I had heard that about MFAs, that they're very literary focused, and sometimes genre fiction gets looked down on by your classmates or the professors. But I don't know if it was just the program I went to NYU, and they were actually really surprisingly kind of encouraging of what I was doing. And there were a few other of my classmates who were also writing science fiction-y or kind of historical fantasy type stuff. And we all felt really, for the most part, really supported, which that was so great. It would have been a really difficult 2 years if they wanted only literary fiction from me. But so I got the inkling of the idea in the program, but I couldn't really figure out how to bring it together until after I'd graduated. I think because it needed time to grow.
Gotcha. So what is what's the setup for the Book of M? What was the first idea that came to you that you realized, okay, there's a story thread here that I can follow?
Actually, it was when I was researching, because I knew that I wanted to write something to do with shadows because they're kind of eerie and cool and a little mystical. But all I had was that image of either shadows disappearing or shadows moving separate from the person, or but I didn't have a story, and I didn't know how to kind of get it started. And so I just went to Google for a couple weeks straight, and I was just reading the stories that other cultures have shadows, or their mythologies, or the way that shadows appear in their art. And I came across this thing called Euro Shadow Day, which is a real, actual day that happens in India. And every year on a certain day in India, everyone's shadows actually do disappear for just a few minutes. And as soon as I read, that was it. As soon as I read that, I had this hook, and that is how I got started. But it's a real actual thing.
Wow. My first reaction when I hear that is, there's a little Peter Pan to the story. Did that thought ever come to you that this is something that has fascinated people for years and years, and what is this mystical thing about shadows that intrigues us so much?
It's a kind of funny. I think sometimes when you're writing, you get kind of tunnel vision with whatever you're working on, and I have seen the Peter Pan cartoons, and I read the play, and it just did not occur to me until I was letting a friend read the rough draft, and she said something about Peter Pan, and I was like, oh yeah. And then, then I went and added a little, there's a couple lines, that kind of honor Peter Pan in the story. But I think sometimes you're so deep in it, you just forget about related things like that. But I do think, that's a great example of, I think that was 1906 or something. And stories about shadows, just go back and back and back because they are so mysterious, but there's such a part of everybody. You are so used to seeing your shadow with you always doing exactly the same thing as you at exactly the same time, no matter what. They never do anything different.
Right. So the book happens around a catastrophe. What is happening in the world, and what is the plot device that you came up with to give these people that kind of kicks the story off?
So the setup is that it's taking place in the very near future, and there is a mysterious phenomenon that first makes one person's shadow disappear permanently. And at first it just seems magical and wonderful, and everybody's just kind of in awe of it. But then it starts to spread very quickly, and people realize that if you're a person whose shadow disappears, you end up gaining a kind of like a magical power, but at the same time you also start to lose your memory. And this kind of the situation, the world starts falling apart basically because you have all these people with immense power, but they also can't remember who they are or who they love or what matters to them, that kind of thing. And the story itself centers around a husband and wife named Eerie and Max, and they have been hiding to survive, this chaos that's going outside. And they make it for about 2 years, and that's the point at which the book starts and the plot kind of gets kicked off. So 2 years in, at the very beginning of the book, Max also loses her shadow, and she falls victim to this phenomenon. And then they have to decide if they're going to keep hiding or if they're going to go out into the world and see if there's a way that they can stop this and they can save her memories and stop her forgetting.
Have you been to India?
I have. Actually, not until I finished. I was pretty much almost finished the book, but I did go, and that was really wonderful to kind of see in person for the first time what I had been writing about for so long.
Well, as a writer who had not yet been, but writes this story with such a rich setting, how did you go about doing research and making sure that you had the tone and the feel of the setting?
I looked at a lot of photos. That sounds kind of silly, but I really sometimes get a really good, or I think I get a really good feeling of a place if I just look at tons and tons of photos of where I think I'm setting the story. And then I also had some friends that had been there or were from there, and we talked a lot, and I let them read sections. Does this kind of feel, does this feel believable? Does this feel like your experience of it? But it's tough. It's weird to write about a real place that you haven't been yet. It's kind of tricky to get it exactly right.
Well, yeah, and I have found that when you're doing that, some small details help. And like you said, talking to friends who've been there, and I like to find out about like the smells and sounds of a place. You'd be amazed at how, a few sensory things dropped in here and there really helps to evoke that feeling of being there.
No, I agree. That's a really good point. Sometimes little details that make it feel more real than the big sweeping, get everything exactly technically accurate feeling.
Right. So how long did it take you to write this book after the false start earlier, but when you started,
Yes.
Seriously on this, how long did it take?
I think because of the false start, it went really quickly. I would say I wrote the first draft in about 9 months, and then I let it sit for a month, and then I revised for 6, and then I sent it out and just prayed.
That's for a first novel. That's a pretty good timeline for a lot of people. Some people will spend more than 2 years working and reworking that book. Do you feel like that your MFA education helped you to get the book out quicker, revise quicker, and feel more confident in the end product?
I do think, I was terrified the whole time of the end product because you just, when you're so close to it, you can never know if it's brilliant or just really not brilliant.
Sure.
But I think that the MFA definitely helps just because I had so much experience already, writing things on a first draft and then also revising them and helping other people revise theirs. So I definitely felt like I had a little bit of a map when I was trying to revise mine, and I had more terminology than I had, before when I was just writing on my own. It probably did help a lot.
Are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you plan the novel out before writing, or do you discover it as you go? Or are you a hybrid of those?
I think I'm kind of a hybrid. I definitely pants it in the beginning because I'm too excited when I get a new idea to be disciplined about planning anything. And so what usually happens is I make a mess for about, 50 pages of scenes that don't go together or make any sense or just, cool snippets of description or moments. And if it's not an idea that's going to work for me, it'll usually peter out before 50 pages. But if I end up over 50 pages and I'm still excited, then I try to think of the end. And if I can think of the ending and I get it and it's good and I like it, then I know I've really got something. And then I try to get a lot more plotty about it. And I sit down and I make a very brief outline, but just some kind of very simple roadmap that'll help me get to where I am at this 50-page mess to the end. So it's it is a little bit of a mix.
I really like that method, actually. There's, because like you say, in the beginning of a new project, there are so many ideas. Everything's fresh, and it's, and the more you write, the more ideas you have. And, a lot of times if you don't get that stuff down on paper, you'll lose half of it. And, so I like that idea, getting all those thoughts down and then like a jigsaw puzzle, trying to arrange it to see what's going to serve the narrative, the best. I really like that process.
Oh, well, it's fun. It's a little scary in the beginning because you have a lot of it that isn't working, and that's something I had to learn to fight through because, if you've got 50% of these 50 pages that aren't working, it feels like, oh, maybe this whole idea isn't working. I don't know if I can ever swing this around, but it is also really fun.
Yeah. The magic system in this book, and I'm air quotes magic. It's not exactly magic. It's not exactly science. You've got this really interesting thing that's happening. Where did the idea for the thing that's happening to people, that's causing them to lose memories and shadows, but giving them these powers, where did that come from, and what was your process like for kind of figuring out how this worked and what rules it was going to operate under? Like, was that a fun experience for you working that part out? And did you ever see yourself writing a book like this?
It was kind of difficult because there are very few rules in the magic system, and that made it. I was worried that it might not make enough sense or be believable enough. But I thought when I was working on, do you want me to spoil how the magic system works? I don't know if that's much of a spoiler.
Well, that's up to you. Only tell what you're comfortable telling.
Okay, I think I can explain a little. So what ends up happening to the people that lose their shadows when they get this magical power? That magic was a little bit inspired by real life, I think. I was thinking about people with Alzheimer's or dementia who start to forget things about their own life. And sometimes they're not afraid, which is good, but sometimes they are afraid when they forget a certain thing. And I think it's a really natural and human reaction to try to fill in something that you don't remember with your best guess, because your brain, it needs that information. It needs an explanation.
Right.
And so in the book, that ends up happening to the shadowless people. When they forget something, they're obviously very scared, and they try to fill that gap in their memory in with their best guess. And their best guess is what ends up becoming the magic. And so what happens is, if they misremember something, they end up misremembering it into reality, and the world actually changes to accommodate what their best guess was. And that was, it was so fun to write, because it is magic, but in a way it felt really real, because I think in your own mind, whatever your best guess was would become really real. And it was really really interesting and meaningful to see what that would mean to other people if the best guess that became real to you also became real to them too.
Yeah. One thing that I love about fantasy or urban fantasy or modern fantasy or science fiction, whatever genres we put that in, those elements become the window dressing or set pieces to tell a very human story. Because at the end of the day, what we're telling stories about are about the human condition and how we interact with each other and how we survive this world. And then, depending on the genre, all of the different things we get to throw at them. But in the end, isn't that what we're doing? We're trying to explore the human condition and look at how we love each other and how we survive this thing together.
Oh, definitely. The genre elements around something make it a lot of fun to read and a lot of fun to write, but I think readers are reading these stories for the human truth that's at the center of it. I think that's what we crave in our stories.
Yeah. So the new book is out today, and it's called The Book of M. Mm-hmm. Is it a secret to tell what the M is for?
Oh, I think that might be it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to leave it at that. The Book of M is out.
What is it? Yeah.
The Book of M is out today. You can go pick up your copy. We highly recommend that you do. Peng Shepherd, what are you working on now? Since this book is coming out to the world today, do you have something else brewing?
It is. I'm in the very, very early stages of a second novel, and I'm in that 50 pages make a mess stage.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to get the end. So yeah.
Cool. Well, we can't wait to see what else comes next. Is there a place where people can find you online to follow along with your career and to read more about you and your work?
Yes, I have a website. It's pengshepherd.com, and I'm also I'm mostly on Twitter, which is @PengShepherd.
Gotcha. And Peng is spelled P-E-N-G. Shepherd.
Yeah.
Great. We're going to put a link to everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
The year was 1834. The month was December. I was 14. Irving's tale was by then well known. The characters of Brom Bones and the beauteous Katrina were widely understood in town to refer to my parents. Rumors persisted. I heard the name of Headless Horseman whispered. My father dismissed all these tales, calling them malicious. Yet more than once I saw him and my mother scanning Agatha's face across the supper table, finding only a secret smile and a look of defiance. I found the rumors fascinating. I followed Agatha like a pup, waiting for her to cast some magic spell. And one day she did. The household servants had set a fire in the hearth for her comfort, and she sat close to it, counting out small gold coins upon a lap board. I hid in the shadows, hoping she might drop a coin and I could retrieve it for myself. One of her servants, a West Indian girl, carried a snowy log into the room and set it on the fire. It began to hiss and pop, the snow melted, and the fire sputtered out. Agatha cursed as I had never heard her do before. She stood, spilling all the gold, and slapped the idiot girl across the face. The girl ran, and my grandmother muttered to herself, searching for match and tong to no avail. When she was not looking, I crept forward and took for myself one of the gold pieces. Then something remarkable occurred. My grandmother sighed, knelt before the fireplace, reached for the logs, and her right hand caught a fire. Flame blossomed and coiled about her wrist. I gasped and cried out,
"Shh! Don't be afraid, my Dylan."
"Your hand!" She raised her palm. Flame sat cupped in it, casting the shadow of her fingers upon the ceiling and walls.
"Lock the door,"
she said. I obeyed. She pointed to the floor, and I sat, waiting breathlessly.
"This is the Van Brunt gift. It will be your gift as well, soon, and your children's forever afterwards."
"Why does it not burn you?" I asked.
"Why should it? Do I deserve to be burned?"
"No."
"Then I am safe from the fire. Do you deserve to be burned, my Dylan?"
I shook my head.
"Show me."
I reached for the flame and took it. I pulled back at once, crying out with pain, wagging my fingertips. The fire caught my sleeve. I could not rid myself of it, as if I clutched burning tar. The pain intensified. The blisters broke, and a rivulet of lymph ran down my arm.
"Your conscience knows, Dylan. You deserved to be burned. Say it."
"I deserved to be burned," said I.
"Again."
"I deserved to be burned." She turned her palm.
"The gold piece."
I nodded and brought the stolen coin from my pocket. She took it and raised it to the light.
"You cannot wield the flame with guilt in your heart, son. Try, and it will devour you. Do you understand?"
I nodded.
"A Van Brunt should not be so weak."
"I'm sorry I took the gold, Grandmother. I'm sorry I was bad. Don't be ashamed of me." She frowned and laid the gold coin on her lapboard. She shook her head sadly.
"I'm not ashamed that you took the gold. I'm ashamed that you felt the guilt.